So, human beings in a modern form, Homo sapiens as we know them, have been around on this planet for about 130,000 years. That is, people who look like you and I and walk on 2 feet upright. And for all of those 130,000 years that we have been around this planet, we've lived, operated with 78 organs in our body. The largest of that being the skin. Yes, somebody said the skin. But in the last 10 years or so, human beings have developed this incredible 79th organ, this device here. And I know some of you are laughing nervously, but this is increasingly like a human organ. It has a skin. You touch it, it responds. It has ears. You speak to it, it understands you. It's got eyes. It recognizes faces and objects if you hold up against it. It's got a voice. It can talk back to you. And it seems to have this incredible brain because when I ask it questions, it seems to know answers that even I can't figure out because it is connected to all publicly available recorded human information that's on the internet and can quickly pull it up. So I was just going to play with it a little bit, and I thought I'd do a quick demo and see how it responds. Okay, Google, what is Picasso's full name? Let me try it. One more time. Okay, Google, the wireless works. What is Picasso's full name?
Pablo Picasso's full name is Pablo Diego José Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno María de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso.
Because that is the human expectation increasingly, that it should know all of his Spanish ancestral names. But increasingly we think of this organ as even capable of having complete conversations like a human being, because I can continue and say, who is he married to?
He was married to Jacqueline Roque and Olga Koklova.
Okay. So when I said who is he married to, as human beings who understand it, but to a machine, what does he mean? I have to define it. But our expectation is these things will not figure it out, and I'm still talking about Pablo Picasso. And even if I spoke in the present tense, it realized it was a historical figure. It replied in the past tense. Even though I tried to trip it by asking a question in the singular, it said, no, he was married twice, and here are both of his wives' names. And more than that, we have gotten used to this organ being a remote control with which we have begun to control the physical world. How many of you have taken a ride-sharing service, Uber, Lyft, etc., in the last 1 week? Just pause and think of what exactly did you do. You pulled out this little thing, that's smaller than the size of a deck of playing cards, clicked it twice, and a car rolls up at your front door to take you to the airport. And you could do the same with food or milk being dropped off at your doorstep. You're now controlling the physical world. So all of this is well and good, and these technologies are amazing, and we are hurtling towards a future where there's more and more of this technology and innovation that has entered our lives. And we hit a unique inflection point about 2.5 years ago when the number of these kind of devices have proliferated, and there are more of them than there are human beings on this planet. This is the first time in our evolution this has happened, that there are more pieces of this mobile technology than actual human beings. More of us have access to this remote control of the physical world than have access to clean drinking water and electricity. The question that I've been asked to answer here is, all of this technology, all of this innovation, is this leading to social good? Is this actually changing the planet for the better? Is this in some way contributing to happiness? And I'm going to take a stab at that question through the lens of about 6 disparate words. I'm going to talk in terms of compassion, collaboration, imagination, transportation, communication, emotion. Not necessarily connected with each other, but each of them a story I want to tell you so that you can decide for yourself if these technologies and the innovation that is coming out of places like Silicon Valley is actually contributing to greater good. Is it actually leading to happiness or not? So I'm going to tell you a series of stories, and for the first one, I want to talk about how compassion is the lens through which people who work in the industry view the world and can bring it to bear when they're innovating. And I'm going to tell this through the story of this gentleman, a friend of mine. His name is Dr. Ronnie Zeiger. He was working with us at Google. And one of the things you'll have to indulge me is most of the examples will come from my workplace because that's the one that I'm most familiar with. But these are just indicative and descriptive of what is happening across the world, across the industry. So they're not unique to one organization, but I'm probably a little partial to examples from that simply because I'm closest to them. So Dr. Ronnie was working on Google Health at Google, and he's called Dr. Ronnie Zeiger not because of a PhD, he was actually a medical doctor. And as he was looking at the data of what kind of health-related questions people were asking, a piece of data that he saw one day deeply disturbed him. And that was the number of times people were typing in the search term suicide into the Google search engine. And as a medical doctor, he was aware of the pervasive nature of this problem. Every day, 88 Americans on average kill themselves. Every day, 22 veterans end their lives. But what disturbed him even more, and Dr. Ronnie Zeiger could not believe this, is what came up when you search for the word suicide. What would you guess? The perfect answer to that question the search engine was throwing up was how to commit suicide. And as a medical doctor, that deeply disturbed him because he said when somebody asks that question, it's a human being's desperate plea for help, and we have to respond with compassion. We have a moral obligation to help that person. We have a responsibility to connect with many of you here who are therapists, counselors, coaches, etc., to help that human being. But that was heresy on this campus because the algorithm is supreme. And the engineer said, no, we have perfected the algorithm. It is giving the perfect answer. Because to do what Dr. Zeiger was asking, we had to artificially insert something else into the search engine results, which we never do. But he argued with data, with compassion, with what is the cost it's on human beings. And for the first time in the history of our company, we made a change where if you now type in suicide, what you get at the top is the 1-800 number to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. The day we inserted this change, what was remarkable is that the next day the New York Times reported a 9% jump in call volume to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. As hundreds, thank you. So hundreds of more people were calling into the hotline, and now, and this is where the collaboration piece kicks in because this is not a problem one company can solve by itself. Trained counselors, volunteers, were talking to them and hopefully persuading many of these people from taking this very drastic step. And this has worked so successfully, all driven by looking at technology and innovation from a compassion perspective, that we've now rolled this out to other parts of the world. So in Mexico, if you search in Spanish, in New Delhi, if you search in Hindi, you will get a similar 800 hotline for the local suicide prevention hotline. The second word through which I want to talk about is this word imagination. Can these technologists whom you think of, thinking in a particular way and addressing problem, are they using their imagination, even as they work on technology and innovation, to work towards social good? So one of the problems that is out there in today's world is the world's hunger for energy. And it's constantly going to increase. And the amount of energy we are generating, all the energy that we are producing from fossil fuels is not going to address the needs of the world's thirst as more and more people enter developing economies. And when we think of energy consumption, you might be thinking of maybe what happens when you drive big cars or big smokestack industries. Let me startle you by telling that all of us in this room every single day, multiple times a day, are actually contributing to this giant hunger for energy. Every time you search, every time you watch a video online, every time you look for directions on a map, every time you do a Facebook post, you are triggering an activity in a data center somewhere that consumes electricity. it heats up these servers. So for cooling, again, you need energy. So and as more and more of us use digital technologies, we are actually triggering off at the back end a huge amount of energy consumption. So for companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc., energy is one of the biggest costs because somebody has to fund that energy so that you can do your searches, so that you can do your digital activity, whether it's shopping or social media or watching online video. This is a problem the industry needs to solve, and we have to use imagination to come up with solutions that do not exist today on a scale that does not exist today. So there are teams of my colleagues who are working on how can we look at renewable energy by which we can address this problem. It could be solar or wind or geothermal, etc., and reduce the cost of these energies less than that what energy from coal costs, so that it becomes very sustainable. So one of the areas we're looking at is actually wind-based energy. Now here's the problem with energy generated from wind. If you look at the windmill in the center, that's a conventional windmill, and it's about 100 meters tall. It generates about 750 kilowatts. If you want more power, that's not much. If you want more power, you make a bigger windmill. It gets taller, much more heavier on the left-hand side, and that can generate 2,300 kilowatts. So the only way you can generate more and more energy from wind is to actually build giant farms of taller and taller windmills, and that is not very sustainable because the footprint is very large. And also, this you can only do in some parts of the world where there is enough wind. So if you look at the world map where you see the blue regions, those are the only places where these tall windmills can generate electricity. So as you can see in the US, it covers some of the areas. This is where, using imagination, the engineers working on this came up with this idea: why don't we mount these windmills on a giant kite? Crazy idea. And float it up in the sky, or put it on a plane, on the wings of a plane, and make the plane go around, because then you can generate electricity from smaller windmills because they're higher up in the sky where the winds are faster. And that was the seed of this idea. So on the right-hand side, as you can see this graphic, if you put the windmill on that blue plane or kite right at the top and send it up to 150 meters, it needs a very small footprint, and it generates almost as much power as a smaller land-based windmill. Something else happens when you were to do that. If you could make this work, and that is, the world map goes from looking like this to looking like this. Huge parts of the world can now be sources of wind energy. But this is where these technologists imagine and come up with these breakthrough ideas to solve problems on a scale that human beings have not conceived. And this is a project called Project Makani. And some of you heard Mo Gavdat, I don't know if he's in the audience here today, who was former chief business officer of Google. He spoke yesterday. And his team actually used to drive, he's no longer, he left Google a few months prior, and his team drives, or his past team drives, a lot of these kind of innovation and projects. So let's see how they went on to build it, and it's currently being tested. This is how the actual product looks like. Windmills mounted on the plane up in the sky, trying to solve this giant problem for humanity. Let's see how it works.
We're in crosswind.
Looks good, looks good. Oh,
It looks good.
does it sound different, or is that just me? That's all right.
Tension good to 27.
Speed is 50 meters per second. Clear to the bottom and climbing.
Looking good here.
Launching out.
Wind speed is 4 meters per second
We're
and
9 o'clock.
42 degrees.
About 40 meters per second across the bottom.
Looking good.
Right, so this is again through the lens of imagination. Before I go on, my clock shows 7 minutes. Karen, did I speak for 23 minutes? Possibly. They have to get through the rest of it then pretty quickly, or maybe go a few minutes over into the break. So the next concept that I want to talk about is this idea of transportation. Human beings, we navigate our way around the world. For all of history, we've gotten around, and getting from place A to place B is a problem or a need that is becoming increasingly more prevalent, getting there more efficiently, faster, more conveniently. And automobiles are one way by which increasingly we are doing it, except that also is associated with lots of issues and problems ranging from traffic to accidents. In fact, every day, every year, about 1.8 million people are killed due to auto accidents, most of them caused by human error, as people fall asleep and drive, get distracted, they text and drive. And this is where, again, using imagination, a group of individuals have been working on and saying, what if we make these cars drive by themselves? And you've been hearing stories of self-driving car. But it is really, the people working in the technology industry that are asking these big questions, which is why an innovation like this became possible. A self-driving car that came out of a place like Silicon Valley, the original idea, as opposed to Detroit or from Hamburg. Again, looking at the world through the lens of what can we do in terms of technology and innovation. And these colleagues of mine, these colleagues of Mo Gavdet's Google X team, said the ultimate test, if this kind of technology really works, is to take a blind person, put that person inside the car in a city that he's never visited, and see if this person can find the way around on their own. And this is what we did as part of the test 2 years ago. We took the self-driving car to Austin, Texas, and asked Steve Mahan. This is Steve. He was then the CEO of the Santa Clara Blind Association, and we put him inside this car in Austin, Texas, a town he's never visited, and made him navigate his way around the town.
In 2015, we completed the world's first truly driverless ride on public roads. Just a person in a car, no steering wheel, no pedals, navigating everyday traffic.
Well, I've never been in Austin, Texas. Now I'm driving in Austin, Texas.
It's a profound experience for me to be alone in a car. A very important segment of my life was cut away when my vision failed, and a self-driving car would give me a huge part of my life back.
This is
So as you can see, what it does to the quality of life to people who might not have otherwise been able to navigate, or even for people, all of us who drive regularly, get around, etc. But this is just one aspect of this whole thing of how can we use technology to solve, for the greater good, the problems of transportation. The other thing that we found is that humans also need how to get from place A to place B. And for the last several years, we've gotten used, we take it for granted, but it's remarkable that the industry together has put in our pockets the entire map of the world in this little device. We carry the entire world's map in our pocket. At a level of detail, every city, every town, every turn, every hotel, restaurant, whatever you want is available, whether you're in Russia, Croatia, Tokyo, or New York City. Something that would have only been possible if you work for a large government entity or a big package delivery organization. Every human being has access to it now if you're one of these devices for free. But we also realized, or the industry realized, that human beings don't look at a spatial two-dimensional map and find your way around. We actually look at physical objects. Particularly if you're in a place like India, your directions are go to the Ganesh temple and make a right, and you see an elephant there. In front of the elephant is my house. You look at the physical world. And which is why the industry came up with this idea of a street view, where you can actually go down any street and look at the street visually using video, and that helps us navigate much better. But then people came up with this question and said, all of that is well and good, but there are large parts of the world where no car can go into, so there's no street view imagery available, and it is, again, using innovation, using technology and imagination. There was one particular engineer who decided on his own to solve what he called the Stonehenge problem, which is if you're trying to get a view of Stonehenge using street view, it would only go to the gates of the monument because no car is allowed onto the property. So he took it upon himself in his spare time to solve the problem by taking the camera, mounting it on a bicycle ice cream cart, and mapped Stonehenge. So this took care of places where cars could not navigate, a small street in Varanasi or in Jerusalem, etc. But then human beings again asked this question. All of this covers the 30% of the Earth's surface covered by dirt. In fact, the person who first raised the question was Sylvia Earle, the oceanographer. She met John Hankey, one of the creators of Google Maps, and asked him this question. Said, John, you've done a phenomenal job with the part of the world that is covered by dirt. What about the 70% that is blue, the amazing oceans we have? And that's when we realized we had completely missed that. And again, the thing that I'm in awe of my colleagues is they don't get daunted by a problem like this. They're like, is there some way by which we can actually benefit humanity for trying to solve a problem, whether there might be any commercial benefit out of doing this or not? And the sense of altruism that drives a lot of them is pretty phenomenal. And a group of them went with a passion for oceans and preserving and protecting it, went to work on it, and they came up with Underwater Street View, where now you can actually go on Google Earth and go look at incredible imagery of underwater life of places like the Gold Coast of Australia or Galapagos. And this again is done collaboratively. We can only come up with these ideas and the technology, but a lot of the rest of the world, people like you, have to then, in partnership, do it. So who does all of this imagery? It is not actually people from the technology companies. So in this case, like off the coast of Galapagos, we build the technology, mount it on these diving cameras, and then the scientists from the Charles Darwin Society are the ones that go and record this imagery. But occasionally you have these flashes of beautiful moments when you see the magic it can create. I was in Nepal 2 years ago with a bunch of my colleagues to work on addressing the very pernicious problem of sex trafficking. We were trying to see if we could use technology at scale to solve the problem of sex trafficking. And I was talking to this group of high school students, and they were talking about their geography lessons. It struck me that these are, the students in Nepal had never seen the ocean. The geography teachers never seen the ocean, and yet they're expected to learn about life on the ocean, about Charles Darwin's experiments, etc. But now, thanks to this kind of capabilities, they can have an experience, an understanding of this big body of nature called oceans that otherwise they had no concept about. And then you can see the ripple effect of this kind of technology and innovation happening around the world. The next area that I want to talk about in terms of lenses, again, through collaboration, when all of us come together by using these pieces of innovation and technology and letting all of our imagination run, the kind of problems we can solve, the kind of elements of happiness that we can bring around the world. So I'm going to tell a story of two colleagues of mine, David Coase and Damien Henry, who work on the Google Cultural Institute, which brings amazing works of art from more than 500 art galleries, museums, etc., so that we can all enjoy it in highly digitized images. Okay? So even if you can't travel to the Louvre or the Rembrandt Museum in Amsterdam, you can still enjoy a work of art. But all of the experiences are two-dimensional. And they wanted to create a 3D experience so that if you were looking at a Rodin sculpture, you can walk around it from all angles and appreciate it. And the way you do that would be through some sort of a virtual reality device. And all of the devices they looked at in the market was very expensive, which means most of the world would not be able to access it. So again, they started imagining wildly, can we use technology and innovation to create this experience, create this social good? And they said, what is the cheapest material we can work with? And the answer was cardboard and plastic. And they came up with the solution, a virtual reality device, literally made out of cardboard and plastic. I know some of you are a little skeptical, you look puzzled. But the way they solved the problem is they said, these things that most people carry have enormous capability. You put them into it, you snap it back, and all of a sudden, we have an inexpensive virtual reality device that we can carry around. And this is almost just a couple of dollars. But often when we build this from an industry perspective, we might not quite understand what sort of applications this could be used for. So we started with the conventional ones like gaming, entertainment, education, etc. But to get more ideas going, we put this out to all of humanity. At one point, we distributed 2.3 million of these to every subscriber of the New York Times, just to see what they would do with it. And one of the stories of what happened afterwards unfolded right here in Miami with this device. When this baby, she was actually born in Minnesota. This was 2 years ago. Baby Tegan Lexkin was born in Minnesota, and she had a problem. She had a twin sister. The twin sister was okay. Baby Tegan had her heart in the wrong place, and one lung was missing. An extremely fragile situation, and doctors didn't know what to do. They sent her home, literally, to die. But her parents refused to give up. They said, there must be someone who can save our daughter's life. So they called around the most well-known pediatric cardiologists, and most of them threw up their hands and said, we won't be able to help. Except for one person right here in Miami, Dr. Raymond Burke of the Nicholas Children's Hospital here. Some of you may know it. And Dr. Burke said, we may be able to do something, except it's a very risky procedure. And before we do it, we typically build a 3D model of the heart so the whole surgery team can evaluate it. Except the 3D printer was broken in that particular hospital. And so they were not sure if they could actually move forward with this procedure. And that's when a junior doctor on the team, Dr. Carlos Munoz, who happened to have one of these, said, maybe we can use this technology to evaluate the strategy as a surgery team. And with that one suggestion, here is how the story unfolded in baby Tegan's life.
I see the baby's heart. I see it in 3D. I can see it from the front, the back. I can see it from the top, and I can see it from the bottom. Each one of these is a 2D image, but when I close it and I look through the lenses, then I get 3D, and I can move it just by turning my head.
I'm wrapping it up.
And you know, for a surgeon.
So they operated upon the baby. She survived, and this is how she now looks with her twin sister, right? And this is what I mean by, starting with the ridiculous idea like a piece of cardboard and plastic, you can actually lead to amazing stories of greater good and happiness that ripple across around the world. I want to finish this off. I'm going to click forward, skip the last principle, and finish up with talking about emotion. All of this is ultimately possible through this notion of emotion that we bring into our jobs. And all of us have to do it. And the way it comes is because we find meaning and context in terms of the work we do. So how do I personally find meaning and context when it comes to me and my colleagues and all of the people, many of the people that work in the industry? There's this notion that the work we do is in the greater good, that it actually has a positive impact on millions of people around the world, that we're trying to solve some sort of problem, that it improves the quality of life. What has struck me most when I go into work every day is everybody has their personal version of the story, how they bring a certain amount of heart, a certain amount of emotion into the job to find meaning and context into what it is that we do. So I want to close off with this final story, which is about really my family journey. And for this, I'm going to give you my personal version of how I find emotion every single day in my work. And for this, I want to take you to this tiny rice farming village called Chittilancheri. It's in a small southern Indian state of Kerala. Anybody here travel to Kerala? Yeah? About 4 or 5 people. It's like a beautiful, very green, agricultural kind of place. And my family, this is my home village, so it's got a very soft spot in my heart. And Chittilancheri is where my grandparents lived as poor rice farmer, cultivating a plot of land not much bigger than what this building occupies. So they were marginal subsistence farmers. And this is where my parents grew up as children of these poor rice farmers. And they had a very modest life. They grew up without electricity. They didn't have running water in the home. They don't have a college education. 10 years of schooling in a rural Indian village school is all they had. And my father, and both my parents actually, walked barefoot to school. And my father used to tell stories of one set of clothing his entire time that he was in school. And I tear up when I tell the story because we lost him 6 months ago. He was the hero of my life. And they had aspirations for their children, just like parents everywhere in the world, just like all of you who have children have aspirations. And thanks to those aspirations, their 4 kids, me and my 3 siblings, went on to get 10 college degrees. Thank you. Including 2 from US Ivy League business schools, even though my parents had never set foot in America. So the question is often asked, what caused that kind of social mobility in one generation? It was simply access to information. But when we were growing up, it was very slow access. I remember taking an 8-hour train journey from the town where I was studying in engineering school to the nearest big city of Chennai so that I could look at a physical copy of the US World News Guide to Graduate Schools. 8-hour train journey. Now we don't wait 8 seconds on our 79th organ, we get impatient. But despite that slow access, I still had access, and that's what propelled the family, all the siblings forward. Today when I go back to the village, as I do every year for ceremonies in our village temple and meet my extended family and cousins, etc., I look at the village school where my mother studied. Infrastructure-wise, it looks the same, except for one difference. For kids in that village, if they have access to these kind of technologies that I talked about, if they have access to that, they now have access to the same amount of information as somebody who goes to the University of Miami. In an era where information is like oxygen, we are leveling the playing field for humanity. And that is the heart, that is the emotion that propels me to come into work every single day. And I want to close this off by, again, proposing this hypothesis that all of this technology and innovation is contributing to enormous amount of greater good, and by improving the quality of life for all of humanity and at scale using these kind of low-cost solutions I talked about, in some way it is our intention that we will also be contributors to happiness.